Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm doing my review of AEW's Revolution. Before I even get started, man, there is a lot of things to discuss about Revolution and what happened last night. Obviously, Sting's farewell match, Sting's retirement match. We're going to get into all that stuff here on the podcast and just everything that all my thoughts from last night's great AEW pay-per-view. But let's get started with the first match on the main card, if you will. It's for the TNT Championship. It is Danny Garcia versus Christian Cage. I thought this was a good match, man, to start Revolution. Back and forth matchup between Garcia and Christian, with Christian keeping the pace of the match. Garcia, though, applies an ankle lock on Christian, but the hold is broken. Garcia and then Christian both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Kill Switch getting involved, hitting a choke slam on Garcia with the referee being distracted. Christian then hits a frog splash on Garcia for a near fall. Matt Menard then attacks Kill Switch up the ramp. Christian then goes for a spear, but his ankle gives out. Garcia then counters with a pile driver on Christian for a near fall in the middle of the ring. Nick Wayne then attacks Garcia with the referee being distracted, which allowed Christian to hit his signature Kill Switch on Garcia. Pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and still TNT champion is Christian Cage. Couple things I want to say about this match, man. Number one, like I said earlier, this was a great match to start Revolution last night. But there was a couple of things I thought about when it pertained to this matchup. Now, did I think Cage was going to retain? Yes. I thought Cage was going to retain the championship because I do think the storyline between him and Copeland's far from over. And speaking of Copeland, I honestly thought, for what it's worth, I thought Copeland was going to be a part of this matchup. I thought Copeland was going to be maybe underneath the ring or come down the ramp to attack, Kill Switch or Nick Wayne to help out Danny Garcia to possibly beat Christian and become the new TNT champion, but that did not happen. So to me, the way I'm looking at it, I do think Copeland and Christian's storyline is far from over. Now, when will that take place? Who knows? It could be AEW's next pay-per-view. Who knows? But I do think that the storyline between Christian and Copeland is far from over. So I do think that Christian will, again, defend the TNT Championship against Copeland when Copeland does come back. But all in all, man, this was a solid matchup. It was a really good showing by Garcia as well. But obviously Christian had some help with Kill Switch and Nick Wayne to help Christian secure a win in this matchup and retain the TNT Championship. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the Continental Crown Championship. It is Eddie Kingston versus Bryan Danielson. I thought this was a great match, man. It told a great story. Back and forth matchup between Kingston and Danielson, with Kingston keeping the pace of the match. Kingston was landing brutal chops on Bryan Danielson. Danielson then hits a suplex off the apron on Eddie Kingston. Kingston gets up, hits an exploder suplex on Danielson. Danielson then lands multiple yes kicks on Eddie in the corner. Kingston then hits an enziguri on Danielson, as well as a Northern Light bomb for a near fall. Kingston then hits a spinning back fist on Danielson. Danielson gets up, hits a running knee for a near fall. Danielson applies a triangle choke on Kingston, but the hold is broken. Danielson lands multiple yes kicks again. Kingston then hits a half and half on Bryan Danielson. And then Kingston hits a power bomb, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and still Continental Crown Champion is Eddie Kingston. After the match, Danielson gives respects to Eddie by shaking his hand. A couple of things I want to talk about with this match too, man. Number one, this was a great match. This was probably one of, out of all the times that you've seen Kingston and Danielson have a match against each other, this was probably, to me, one of the best, if not the best match that these two gentlemen have had so far since the storyline's been, in fruition. I think this was a great match last night. It was a great showcase by Eddie Kingston. And it was a tall tale task for Eddie, to be honest with you. Bryan Danielson is probably one of the best technical wrestlers in the world. So to see Eddie in this matchup, toe-to-toe with Bryan Danielson, it was a great match, man. It told a great story. And obviously with Danielson giving some respect to Kingston, it was great to see, man. I think Eddie Kingston, with what he's done, especially with his AEW run so far up to this point, has been absolutely awesome. And I have a lot of praise for Eddie Kingston and what he's done with AEW. I remember seeing Eddie Kingston in NWA, and when I used to cover NWA, I was talking about how much Eddie Kingston, to me, was, a crucial part in NWA and what they were doing at the time when Billy Corgan came in and, bought NWA and brought in guys like, obviously Eddie Kingston, Eli Drake, a.k.a. L.A. Knight, Ricky Starks. Eddie Kingston was a big, vital piece to NWA, and he has a great promo. And honestly, for what it's worth, I look forward to what's going to happen next with Kingston, especially with this Continental Crown Championship, man. Who's going to be the next, the challenger for his belt? To me, I think what Eddie Kingston's doing right now, people need to take notice. I think, to have him as a Triple Crown champion with obviously, the Continental Crown Championship, the Ring of Honor World Championship, and I believe the New Japan Strong Championship as well. You probably wouldn't have even seen this until probably back in the day. And I mentioned this before when this tournament was announced for the Continental Crown Championship, that it has a lot of resemblance to All Japan Pro Wrestling and how they did things, with guys like Misawa and Kawada. Vader was also a part of that, Dr. Death, Steve Williams. A lot of it was tournament-based matches that would lead you into possibly getting an opportunity at the Triple Crown Championship. And I think, Tony Khan kind of took a page out of their playbook and brought it into AEW to make this Crown Championship for AEW. So I'm all for it. I think it's a great concept for AEW. Hopefully they continue to do that tournament for the foreseeable future, because I think it was one of the best things AEW brought to television for the past few months. So again, sky's the limit for Eddie Kingston. It was a great showcase from Eddie as well as Bryan Danielson. And like I said, man, I look forward to what's going to happen next. Who's Eddie going to defend that belt against next? And what's next for Bryan Danielson? Are we going to see Danielson kind of be more in line with what Jon Moxley and Claudio Castagnoli are doing? Or is Danielson, now that he's done with Eddie Kingston, possibly, is he going to go after the TNT Championship? Or possibly a World Championship opportunity for Bryan Danielson in the near future? So again, sky's the limit for both. Moving on from that, we have the 8-man scramble matchup. It is Hook, Powerhouse Hobbs, Lance Archer, Magnus, Brian Cage, Wardlow, Dante Martin, and Chris Jericho. And the winner of this match will get a future AEW World Heavyweight Championship opportunity. To be honest with you guys, man, this was an okay match at best, to be honest with you. It was a back-and-forth match. Wardlow and Lance Archer both exchanged in the middle of the ring, with Archer hitting a springboard moonsault. Hobbs gets involved by hitting a spinebuster on Lance Archer in the middle of the ring. Jericho then hits a codebreaker on Wardlow. Magnus gets involved by hitting a 619 into a rolling cutter. Lance then hits a choke slam. Jericho and Magnus then hit a double lion salt in the middle of the ring. Hobbs then hits a power slam on Archer. Hook then hits a Northern Light suplex on Jericho. Jericho then gets up, hits a springboard drop kick, sending Hobbs to the outside. Dante Martin then hits a springboard moonsault on Archer. And then Wardlow ultimately hits a devastating powerbomb on Dante Martin, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Wardlow. A couple of things I want to say about this, man. Obviously, if you guys watched Dynamite, I believe it was last week, Wardlow cut that great promo. That he was, enough is enough. He's tired of the bullshit. He wants to be a part of the main event scene. He wants to be the top dog in AEW. And he feels like what Tony Khan and AEW are not really seeing Wardlow's full potential. To me, and I told you guys this the past couple weeks, man. Wardlow, if you really wanted to take Wardlow seriously, he has to get away from having these 30-second to 40-second enhancement talent matches where he goes in there and squashes these people, and then it's like, all right, well, now I'm the new number 1 contender for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. That doesn't say anything for Wardlow at all. Was this a decent test for Wardlow? Yeah. But with that being said, was this match that great? No. I'm sorry. I mean, for what it's worth, man, I seeing people like Powerhouse Hobbs and Lance Archer are part of this matchup, it's great. It's a really good test for Wardlow. But at the same time, I don't want to see an 8-man scramble match where Wardlow is facing, 7 other people to see if Wardlow can, stack up to get an opportunity possibly at Samoa Joe's AEW World Championship. That's not what I want. But what I do want is Wardlow to be challenged. I don't want him to face off with enhancement talent. And he didn't have enhancement talent in this matchup. But, I mean, honestly, for what it's worth, man, not to disrespect any of the names that were in this matchup, but why is Magnus a part of this matchup? I know he qualified for the match due to a match that he had on Collision, but nobody, I can honestly tell you this with absolute respect to CMML. Nobody knows, a lot of the American fans do not know who these guys are. They don't. So when you bring these guys in, it was the same thing that I was talking about with, the Blackpool Combat Club going up against some of the roster from CMLL. Look, I have all the respect in the world for that promotion. I think they have great wrestlers over there, great talent. But again, I cannot stress this enough. Not a lot of the American fans are not really going to know much about these guys, and Tony Khan is not really telling you a whole lot about this talent coming over from CMML to AEW, and you're putting them in high-profile matches. But nobody knows who these people are. I remember when Hechicero came over from CMML and had a match with Bryan Danielson on Collision, and everybody kept saying, oh, this is going to be a technical versus technical match. Okay, great, but what is so special about Hechicero that we need to know to make it more important for us fans to be invested in one of these superstars from CMLL? And obviously AEW and Tony Khan's not doing that. They're not. It's the same thing with FTR and the Blackpool Combat Club match, even for Revolution. What happened to the storyline that was going on with the Blackpool Combat Club and Moxley and Claudio specifically going up against some of the superstars from CMLL? Now, do I think Moxley and Claudio will go over to do something with CMLL superstars? Yeah, I can see that. I can see it kind of being an invasion angle, and I thought that's kind of what Tony Khan and AEW were doing. Also, we also had the Forbidden Door, so to me, Tony Khan might be booking New Japan, AEW, and some of the superstars from CMLL all part of the Forbidden Door for this year. Okay, great, but we have to get invested, and I think that's the biggest thing. It's not taking anything away from Magnus. It's just, at the end of the day, you come in, you have one match. We haven't seen you at all up to this point, except for that match on Collision, and then you qualify for this 8-man scramble, but we have no idea who you are and what you bring to the table. That's my biggest thing. Get me invested, man. Let me understand who this person is and what the hell is going on, and we're not getting that right now from AEW and Tony Khan. And I'm pretty sure they're going to continue to do work with CMLL, which I'm all for that. I'm absolutely all for that, but I want to be invested on who this person is or who these people are. And we're not getting that right now. We're not getting video packages. We're not getting storylines built around some of these guys coming over from CMLL to have these matches with Moxley or Claudio or whoever for that case. And that's my biggest takeaway, one of the biggest takeaways from this 8-man scramble. The other takeaway that I'm looking at with this matchup is Wardlow. Obviously this match was built around Wardlow to make Wardlow look more dominant and make him look like a suitable competitor against Samoa Joe for a possible opportunity at the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. Now, do I think this was the best way of going about it? No, I don't. I think this is the one match on this card for Revolution last night that was like, you could have missed me with this match, to be honest with you. And I think it's a lot of people's opinion as well. I just think Wardlow needs more profile matches, but does need to put Wardlow against 7 other people to make him look like he's ready for an opportunity. I want to see a one-on-one match with Archer, or a one-on-one match with Hobbs or Miro or Jericho, and give him top competitors to challenge Wardlow. Because for what it's worth, man, I mean, what does this really prove with Wardlow, even with him winning this matchup? Because you have other people involved in this matchup that could easily get a pinfall, and Wardlow, I mean, we're back to square one with Wardlow. So to me, with Wardlow as a whole, obviously, I think people are not really 100% invested in Wardlow after everything that's going down with Wardlow. And I mentioned this so many times about Wardlow too, man, that, I remember when he had that great storyline with MJF, and it was a great storyline. This is when MJF had Pinnacle with FTR and Wardlow and stuff like that. I believe Shawn Spears was also a part of that stable, if I'm not mistaken. And it was a great storyline, man. Wardlow was trying to do everything he can to get away from MJF. But MJF had Wardlow come in to AEW and kind of have a contract between MJF and Wardlow. And it was a great storyline, and Wardlow, got even with MJF. And then after all that great storyline and all that great build and great momentum from Wardlow, the next match he had after that was JD Drake. And the momentum kind of died for Wardlow for a little bit, and then he became TNT champion, which is awesome. Great. But then he pretty much hot potatoed the championship, and then there was no real title run for Wardlow. And I think, to me, that was one of the biggest mistakes that AEW and Tony Khan did. I personally believe, in my heart of hearts, that Tony Khan and AEW really have no idea what to do with Wardlow. And I think we're going to start slowly seeing that. And I mentioned, a couple months before, I still think there are certain talents that are still on the short list to go back to WWE. And I think, the two names that easily pop up in my head right now is obviously Malachi Black. Ricky Starks, and I believe Wardlow was also on the hot seat to also possibly go over to WWE if the opportunity is given. But I mean, am I 100% invested in what Wardlow's doing? No, because my thing is how many times have we seen this with Wardlow and it's failed? You know, that's my biggest thing with this. I'm all for having some competition for Wardlow. I just don't think he needs to be in an 8-man scramble to really showcase Wardlow's talent, in my honest opinion. But hats off to Wardlow for getting the win in that match, and I look forward to what's going to happen next with Wardlow. Moving on from that, we have an international championship matchup. It is Orange Cassidy versus Roderick Strong. Again, I thought this was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Orange and Strong, with Orange keeping the pace of the match. Strong hits a devastating gut wrench off the top rope, and it looked absolutely brutal. The way that Orange Cassidy came down from that gut wrench powerbomb, and the way he landed on those ropes, man, it just looked absolutely brutal. But Orange Cassidy gets up, hits a Stung Dong Billionaire on Strong. Orange hits a DDT off the top rope on Strong as well. Orange then goes to the top rope, hits a Panama Sunrise on Roderick Strong. Orange then hits a Orange Punch on Strong as well as a Beach Break. Strong gets up, hits a jumping knee, and then Strong ultimately hits the finish on Orange Cassidy, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match and new AEW International Champion is Roderick Strong. After the match, Matt Taven and Mike Bennett come down to the ring to celebrate with the newly crowned champion Roderick Strong, but the fans go crazy, and all of a sudden we see somebody jump over the barricade, and that person is none other than Kyle O'Reilly. O'Reilly is back in AEW after a lengthy injury. Bennett goes to take off his Undisputed Kingdom shirt and give it to O'Reilly, but O'Reilly throws his shirt back at Roderick Strong. He says something in his ear, and then he walks away. So to me, I don't know if O'Reilly is going to be joining Undisputed Kingdom, man. There was actually a lot of things to look at about this matchup. Number one, did I think Strong was going to beat Orange Cassidy? Yeah, I 100% did, man. There was something. I'm liking the momentum that Undisputed Kingdom has been doing as of late. They've been attacking Orange Cassidy, Rocky Romero, Trent Beretta, Chuck Taylor. So you can slowly start seeing the wheels turn a little bit for what Undisputed Kingdom's trying to do. So one of those guys had to win a championship. Right now, Wardlow is still building himself up to possibly go after the World Championship. So to me, the best way they can do that is have Roderick Strong beat Orange Cassidy and become the international champion, because you already have Bennett and Taven as the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions. So I'm sure, like I said, Undisputed Kingdom is definitely looking for championship gold. Now, how Kyle O'Reilly fits into this, I don't know. I don't know if O'Reilly is going to join Undisputed Kingdom based upon what he did last night by throwing that shirt back to Roderick Strong, saying something in his ear, and then, walking away. I don't know. I think for what I can see right now, and again, it's just my opinion, I think O'Reilly's going to do his own thing. I think that's what's going to happen. I think the way that he came into the ring last night, a whole new look, a whole new attitude. I think O'Reilly is going to go on a singles run for a while. I don't know if he's going to join the Undisputed Kingdom yet. I don't know. I have no idea. Or maybe O'Reilly is going to try to get Roderick Strong possibly away from Undisputed Kingdom, and there's a little, hostility there between O'Reilly and Strong. Who knows? But again, it's great to see O'Reilly back. I know a lot of people have said that, there was a chance that he might not come back to wrestle ever again. So it's great to see him back in AEW. He's been gone for quite a while, so to see him back in AEW again is awesome. I'm glad that he's healthy and he's back. So again, I look forward to what's going to happen next with O'Reilly, man, and how, what's going to happen with Undisputed Kingdom now that O'Reilly is back. And what did O'Reilly say to Roderick Strong last night at Revolution? So hopefully we get some kind of insight of what's going on with O'Reilly and the Undisputed Kingdom. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. Is FTR versus Jon Moxley and Claudio Castagnoli. I thought it was cool, though. There was a great moment when Moxley and Claudio came to the ring. They walked to the crowd like they usually do, but they had the shoulder pads of the Road Warriors, kind of paying homage to Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors, which I thought was absolutely awesome. The match itself, man, it was a great match. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Dax and Claudio both exchanging in the middle of the ring. Dax and Moxley then both exchange in the middle of the ring as well. Dax then hits a pump-up powerbomb. FTR then hit a spike pile driver for a near fall. Mox and Claudio then hit a European uppercut. Doomsday, which I thought was absolutely incredible. Claudio then hits a giant swing on Dax in the middle of the ring. FTR hit a shatter machine on Mox for a near fall. Claudio then hits a neutralizer on the outside on Wheeler. Mox hits a Death Rider on Dax for a near fall, but Mox also applies a submission hold as well. And your winners of the match, by submission are Jon Moxley and Claudio Castagnoli. A couple things I want to talk about with this match, man. This was a solid match, to be honest with you. And I told you guys that there was no way in hell that you weren't going to see FTR and the Blackpool Combat Club a part of Revolution. They're both healthy. They were both ready to go. And Tony Khan was definitely going to book both these teams. So it just made for a great match, man. And you know, honestly, for what it's worth, and I can't stress this enough, man, FTR, man, you know, to me, FTR is probably one of the best tag teams right now in the world. In my honest opinion, man, the body of work that both Dax and Wheeler has put in, even with AEW, I mean, they've had some phenomenal matches. And, you know, you look at the matches they had with the Young Bucks, matches they had with the Briscoes, you know, rest in peace to Jay Briscoe. Just phenomenal matches, man. And they continue to get better and better and better and better. And, you know, even Dax, I think at one time he had a little bit of a singles run, man, and he was doing a phenomenal job. You know, FTR, Dax, and Cash, probably the best tag team in the world right now, in my honest opinion. And this match is, again, another definition of that. I mean, Dax was busted wide open during this match. Just from the onslaught that he was getting from Moxley and Claudio, and he just continued to keep going and going and going, man. And, you know, FTR, who knows what's going to happen next? I have an idea, which I will talk about later in the podcast, of what's going to be next for FTR, as well as Moxley and Claudio. But, again, man, I look forward to what's going to happen next. I think it's going to be awesome. And, again, this was a great showcase of AEW's tag team division. And I look forward to what's going to happen next with both teams, man. I'm definitely excited to see what happens next. But moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's for the AEW Women's Championship. It is Toni Storm defending her AEW Women's Championship against Deonna Purrazzo. This was an okay match. It was a good match. It was a decent match. Back and forth matchup between Purrazzo and Storm, with Purrazzo and Storm both exchanging in the middle of the ring. Storm was keeping the pace of the match. Storm then applies an ankle lock, but the hold's broken. Deonna then hits a Hurricane Rana into an armbar on Toni Storm, but Storm hits a pile driver, or a Storm Zero, if you will, on Deonna Purrazzo, pins her for the 3, and your winner of the match, and still AEW Women's Champion, is Toni Storm. Couple things I'm going to say about this, man. This might be a hot topic to talk about. The storyline that we got between Purrazzo and Storm was great. I think it was one of the best storylines we got from the women's side of AEW in quite a while. But with that being said, and I mentioned this multiple times, you know, it's great to have a storyline, but the final scene of that storyline has to be the match, and the match has to equal what the storyline was. To me, we didn't get that last night with this matchup, to be honest with you. And this wasn't something that they were following Will Ospreay and Takeshita's match, which I thought was awesome last night. The storyline just did not fit. The storyline was great, but the match, the way it went down last night, just wasn't that good, in my honest opinion, for what it could have been. With that being said, I mean, it's great to have Purrazzo a part of the roster. I think Deonna Purrazzo was great. I think she's a great competitor. There's a lot of stuff left for Purrazzo in AEW, as well as Toni Storm. Did I think Toni Storm was going to drop the belt? No. I didn't see her drop the belt right now. Toni Storm is one of the best things AEW has to offer right now. So I did not see Deonna Purrazzo go over and become the new AEW Women's Championship, or Women's Champion. But with that being said, man, we have a decent storyline between both Storm and Purrazzo. And then we get the final product, which is the match. And I just feel like the match didn't live up to the hype. The match did not live up to the storyline, in my honest opinion, and I felt like they could have done better in this matchup between Purrazzo and Storm, and we just did not get it. You know, and that was one of the things that was like kind of disheartening, man, because to me, and I've said this multiple times about AEW, that I'm hoping that, you know, bringing in, you know, writing team and stuff like that, and they brought in Jennifer Pepperman. I was kind of hoping that she would kind of be more involved in the women's side of AEW, and we got more predominant storylines, something that we can be invested in. And credit, the storyline between Toni Storm and Purrazzo wasn't bad, but the match just did not live up to the hype of the storyline. I was kind of looking for a lot more in this matchup, and we just did not get it, at least in my opinion. But again, hats off to Toni Storm for getting the win in that match and retaining the AEW Women's Championship. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. And to be honest with you guys, man, this is probably, to me, candidate for match of the year. To be honest with you, all, it's Takeshita versus Will Ospreay. This was a fantastic match, man. This was a great match, back and forth matchup between Takeshita and Ospreay, with Ospreay hitting a Hurricane Rana on Takeshita. Ospreay and Takeshita then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Ospreay hitting a springboard forearm on Takeshita. Ospreay then hits a handspring Pele kick on Takeshita. Ospreay hits a Spanish fly as well in the middle of the ring. Takeshita then gets up, lands a devastating forearm strikes on Ospreay. Ospreay then hits a underhook powerbomb on Takeshita. Takeshita gets up, hits a blue thunder bomb out of nowhere on Ospreay. Ospreay then gets up, hits a springboard cutter, Oz cutter on Takeshita. Takeshita then hits a devastating brainbuster off the top rope on Ospreay that looked absolutely brutal. Takeshita then hits a running knee on Ospreay for a near fall. Ospreay then gets up, hits a Styles Clash on Takeshita for a near fall in the middle of the ring. Ospreay then hits a Tyler Driver 91 on Takeshita. And then Ospreay hits his signature Hidden Blade on Takeshita, pins him for the 3. And your winner of the match is Will Ospreay. A couple of things I want to talk about with this match, man. Like I mentioned before I even talked about this match, to me, this is 100% candidate for match of the year. 100%. This match was a banger. And I told you guys about this matchup last week when this match was even, a couple weeks ago, even when this match was announced, that this was going to be that sleeper match. This is going to be that one match that no one's really thinking about and that they might be sleeping on. And it's going to be insane. And it was. This match was absolutely insane. And again, hats off to Ospreay, but hats off to Takeshita. Takeshita has a lot of potential, man. And he's got future world champion written all over him. Absolutely. But this match was an absolute banger, man. This match was from top to bottom, fantastic matchup. And I mean, those forearm strikes from Ospreay and Takeshita were just absolutely brutal. That brainbuster that Takeshita hit off the top rope on Ospreay, which let Ospreay pretty much land on the opposite side of the ring to the outside, looked brutal, man. They showed Ospreay's back, and his back was all busted open and stuff. It just was absolutely brutal. This was a solid match, man. This was probably one of the best matches on the card last night, and it was a great night last night, by the way. But this was a banger match, and I look forward to what's going to happen next with Ospreay, man. Ospreay, after watching this match last night, in my honest opinion, I think bringing in a guy like Ospreay, I would strap the rocket ship on his back and let him take AEW where he wants to take it, and have full confidence in Ospreay, because Ospreay is probably the best wrestler in the world right now, and he just has phenomenal matches. I mean, Ospreay, who knows what's going to happen next with Ospreay? I think his next match is against Kyle Fletcher on Dynamite this week. Again, should be another really, really good match between both Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. But again, man, Ospreay could be TNT champion, international champion, AEW world champion. There's a sky's limit for Will Ospreay. But to me, if I was Tony Khan, I would contemplate possibly putting the rocket ship on Ospreay's back to see where he's going to take AEW, because you can't miss out on a guy like that and a talent like that. Ospreay is phenomenal. And, this was the first match that he had being signed to AEW. And it was just an absolute banger match. Great match. And like I said, probably a candidate for match of the year, to be honest with you. So hats off to Ospreay for getting the win in the match. And honestly, for what it's worth, hats off to Takeshita as well, man. Takeshita is a solid competitor, future world champion. And, he puts on a great performance, man. And hats off to him as well. But, again, I look forward to what's going to happen next with both Ospreay and Takeshita moving forward, man. I'm definitely excited. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a triple threat match for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. It is Swerve versus Page versus Samoa Joe. I thought this was a really, really good matchup. Back and forth matchup between Swerve, Page, and Joe, with Joe keeping the pace of the match. Page then hits a fallaway slam on Swerve. Joe and Swerve then both exchange. Page and Swerve then exchange in the middle of the ring. Page then hits a moonsault into a tombstone on Swerve. Swerve then gets up, hits a powerbomb. Joe then hits a muscle buster on Page. It looked absolutely brutal. Swerve then hits a swerve stomp on Joe, as well as a last call on Samoa Joe as well. Swerve then hits a swerve stomp. Page then pulls out the referee. Page hits Swerve with the championship title. Page also hits 2 buckshot lariats for a near fall. Page then goes for another buckshot lariat, but Joe counters with a submission hold. Hold is broken. Page then attacks another referee. Swerve starts getting frustrated. Page then hits a buckshot lariat on Joe as well. Joe then gets up, hits a half and half on Swerve, and then applies a submission hold and your winner of the match and still AEW World Heavyweight Champion is Samoa Joe. Couple things I want to talk about with this matchup, man. Honestly, I was completely torn on who I thought was going to win this matchup. I thought, to me, was I surprised Samoa Joe won this matchup and retained the AEW World Championship? No, I'm not. To me, Samoa Joe needs a decent run with the AEW World Championship, in my opinion. And he's doing a fantastic job with it so far. But I did have a little bit of hope for Swerve, man. I think Swerve, I have a lot of praise for Swerve, and Swerve has a lot of potential, man. And I honestly think he'd be a great world champion, in my honest opinion. I think Swerve, he's got the momentum. The fans are behind Swerve. So to me, it was like, well, if Joe loses, I want to see Swerve. And I'm a big fan of Paige as well, but to me, the momentum right now is behind Swerve. And I thought for a second, I was like, you know what? If Swerve wins it, would I be excited? Absolutely. Would I be mad if Joe lost? No. Because to me, Swerve, like I said, man, he's got everybody behind him. You know what I mean? He's one of the top names right now in AEW. The fans are behind Swerve, and right now Swerve is completely over in AEW. So I'll be all for it. But to see Joe walk out with the championship title, I'm not against it. I think Joe needs a solid run with the belt, which I'm all for that. And you got to ask yourself this question too. When MJF does come back, do you put him against Samoa Joe? Does MJF get his rematch? Who knows? So to me, Joe needs a solid run with that belt. It creates more storylines, more possibilities. And I also, for what it's worth, man, I don't think we've seen the last of Swerve and Paige either. Because after the match happened, it kind of seemed like Paige just quickly took the tap to make sure that Swerve didn't win the championship. So I could see another installment in the storyline between Swerve and Paige. It's a possibility. And, for what it's worth, Paige and Swerve has had some phenomenal matches. So I do have a belief that the storyline between Swerve and Paige is far from over. I think we will get another match or installment between Swerve and Paige here relatively soon. I think Swerve and Paige have some unfinished business that needs to be finished, and it's not finished yet. But with Joe, again, who knows what's going to happen next? Will Swerve or Paige get a rematch, or is this time for MJF come in, for MJF to come in to get his rematch against Samoa Joe because he hasn't got his rematch yet? So it's definitely a possibility, but this was a solid matchup. And then, for what it's worth, it was a really good match, but it was really hard to follow what Takeshita and Ospreay did because, honestly, match quality-wise, this was match of the night for me, in my opinion. Takeshita and Ospreay tore the house down last night, and it was a phenomenal matchup. So it was kind of hard to follow that match, but this world title match was really solid. It was a really good matchup, told a great story. But like I told you guys, I think Swerve and Paige that whole storyline is far from over, and Joe needs a solid run with the championship, with that title. I think Joe being world champion for AEW is great. I think he's doing great things with that title and that belt. And he's great in storylines, man. And I think, to me, honestly, you have to ask yourself, what's next for Samoa Joe? It could be a rematch with Swerve, possibly, or Paige, or a possible returning MJF to challenge Samoa Joe in his rematch for the AEW World Championship. And that very well, it honestly, it could happen. It very much could happen. So, definitely looking forward to that, and hats off to Samoa Joe for getting the win in that match and retaining the AEW World Championship. After that, we have Tony Schiavone and Excalibur and Taz on commentary throughout the entire night, but they make an announcement. Excalibur makes an announcement that on April 21st, next month, AEW presented a new pay-per-view known as Dynasty, which will take place April 21st in St. Louis, Missouri. A couple things I want to say about this, man. Number one, I made a comment about this, I think, a week or two ago, that there was speculation and rumors that AEW was going to bring in a new pay-per-view known as Dynasty, and it looks like that's actually come to fruition, and we're getting that April 21st in St. Louis, Missouri, I believe. So I'm all for it, man. I know some people are against it, and I'm on the same page with you in a small way. I think adding more pay-per-views is not necessarily a bad thing, but also not necessarily a good thing. I'm kind of split 50-50. But I will say this. This is something where if Tony Khan is going to go this route and bring in new pay-per-views, whether it's 9 to 12 pay-per-views a year, and we're getting a pay-per-view every single month, okay, fine. But I think if you're going to do something like that, you have to entertain the idea of a streaming deal. For an abundance of reasons. It's not just the money for the pay-per-views and how much they're going to be, and the fact that you're paying $50 every month possibly for a pay-per-view, which, yeah, it does add up. It definitely adds up. I mean, I think anybody watching AEW pay-per-views can tell you that yeah, it does add up. But I think the streaming deal obviously would help out AEW and the fans immensely. After being there, what now, 4 or 5 years with AEW, they have the catalog, man. They have Ring of Honor's catalog. They have all the stuff that AEW's put together, all the pay-per-views, all the great moments. Moxley debuting at Double or Nothing. The crazy and devastating and just awful barbed wire death match that they have between Moxley and Omega. They have all this stuff, man, this entire catalog. The original All In, they can put that on HBO Max and then put the pay-per-views on HBO Max. That way the consumer, the fans, pay $9.99 a month to get HBO Max and not have to pay $50 every single month to watch these pay-per-views, so you guys can everybody can save a little bit of money in their pockets but still have fun and enjoy AEW's programming, which I'm all for that. But I think Tony Khan and Warner Media and all that stuff in Time Warner, this discussion needs to happen. Just for the future of AEW, because honestly, for what it's worth, I can't see a lot of people buying, spending $50 every month on a pay-per-view every single month. It's just insane. I think if you align yourself with a streaming deal, whether it be HBO Max or whatever other streaming deal that, they decide to go with, it's a great thing. It's great for business, man. It's great for AEW and Tony Khan. It's great for the customers and the consumer that watches this product, weekly. I think it would be great for all parties involved. You put the pay-per-views on HBO Max, $10 a month, and then you obviously put the catalogs from Ring of Honor and all the stuff that you have for AEW and put it all on HBO Max. You have the catalog. I mean, you haven't been there for 10 years or 15 or 20 years, but they've been there for 5 years, and they have a lot of backstock in a catalog, with whether it be AEW, especially Ring of Honor. Put it on HBO Max, man. It gets people, that are wrestling fans. And it's also beneficial to HBO Max because now they get more people that are subscribing to their streaming service, which makes them more money. And it just gets a lot more eyeballs on the product of HBO Max as well. So it's a win-win situation for both parties. And hopefully, if Tony Khan's going this route, and it seems like he is going this route with the pay-per-views, I think a streaming deal needs to happen here relatively soon. And hopefully it does. I know Tony Khan had mentioned during a media call that, obviously there's been a lot of speculation about 12 pay-per-views for AEW. But Tony Khan kind of wants to stick with 8 or 9 because he also has 3 pay-per-views that he does a year for Ring of Honor. So, if we're only getting 9, okay, that's fine. But I still believe that we need a streaming deal for AEW. I just think it's beneficial for all parties involved. So, again, it was announced by Excalibur last night during Revolution that on April 21st, AEW is presenting a new pay-per-view known as Dynasty, April 21st, and I believe it's in St. Louis, Missouri. So, again, AEW adds another pay-per-view, and it's known as Dynasty. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of Revolution. It is Sting's last match, his farewell match. It is the Young Bucks versus Darby Allin and Sting in a tornado tag match for the AEW Tag Team Championships. Before the match even gets started, Ric Flair's music hits. He walks down the ramp. And then he's also joined by Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, which I thought was awesome. And then even before the match even takes place, after Steamboat and Flair come down to the ring, we get a video package from Sting, man, and it was absolutely awesome. And the way it was portrayed, and the fact that it was shown in like a movie theater, and it said the final showtime, and you see Sting walking in this movie theater. He sits down in the seat, the projector's going, and he's just watching all these. Even the fans were all watching these great moments that Sting had. Now, it wasn't obviously his time in WCW and stuff like that because WWE owns WCW. But all the great matches and memories that he had working over in Japan. The matches he had with Great Muta. The matches that he's had, just in Japan, man. It just fantastic matches. Matches he had with the Steiners in WCW as well. It was just great memories of Sting. And to see Sting sit there and watch all these memories, and then, the video ends, in not in the video package, but in the video package, the movie stops and the curtain goes, back together again, and you see Sting saying, the final showtime or it's showtime. It was awesome. It was a great moment. And then we get Sting's entrance music, and then the music hits, and then we get a spotlight, and then it's the Sting from, I believe it was 1991, Great American Bash Sting with the red, white, and blue face paint and the red, white, and blue trunks, and that one of the person that was wearing that was actually one of Sting's sons, which I thought was absolutely awesome. And then another spotlight comes up, and then we get the NWO Wolfpack Sting, which again was Sting's other son, which I thought was awesome. And then we get Sting finally coming out. He's in the middle between, in between both of his sons with, obviously the Great American Bash Sting and the NWO Wolfpack Sting and the real Sting. I thought it was awesome, and it was a great moment. The fans erupted. And by the way, before I even talk about this match, hats off to all the people that showed up last night and all the fans in Greensboro, North Carolina. Those fans were incredible, man. They're some of the greatest wrestling fans on this planet. The crowd was electric. I'm sitting there watching that, and every single match, man, the crowd was just into every single match. And again, hats off to you guys that live out in the Greensboro, North Carolina area that showed up last night for Sting's last match. I applaud you guys, man. You guys made it really special. Even watching it on pay-per-view, man, you guys did a hell of a job, especially for Sting's last match. And this match was awesome, man. This was a great match, a great showcase by Sting and Darby Allin. It was a back-and-forth matchup. Sting and Darby hit a Stinger Splash on the Bucks, and then Sting's sons get involved. They hit Stinger Splashes on the Bucks as well, which I thought was absolutely awesome, paying homage to their father. Darby then hits a coffin drop to the outside, taking out the Young Bucks. Nick Jackson then gets up, hits a Falcon Arrow off the stage through a table on Darby Allin. It looked absolutely brutal. Matt Jackson hits a suplex off the stage as well on Sting through a table to the outside. Darby then hits a senton off the ladder through a glass window that erupted. It looked absolutely brutal. Darby Allin's back was completely busted wide open, bleeding all over the place. Matt then hits a powerbomb on Sting through a table. Young Bucks then send Sting through the glass as well. Sting's laying in the middle of the ring. Matt then attacks Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Flair gets involved in the match by trying to save Sting from the attack from Matt Jackson, but the Bucks end up hitting a super kick on Ricky Steamboat and Flair. Sting then gets up, hits a Scorpion Death Drop on Matt Jackson. The Bucks then hit a BTE trigger for a near fall. Sting hits a Scorpion Death Drop for a near fall, but then Sting applies a Scorpion Death Lock, and your winners of the match, and still AEW Tag Team Champions are Sting and Darby Allin. After the match, you can see Sting and Darby Allin in the ring. You can see as well as his sons come back into the ring to celebrate, Sting's victory. You also see sitting ringside, I believe it was Magnum TA, Nikolai, as well as Scotty Riggs. They were sitting ringside. Steamboat also celebrates, and Flair celebrates as well. The entire roster comes out on the ramp and, celebrates with Sting. This was a great moment, man. This is something that I definitely wanted to talk about with you guys and my thoughts on Sting. And I'm not going to go into full detail, but, you see people in the crowd. There was even a guy there that was crying, seeing Sting's final match. If you guys, to me, I was always a WCW fan. I love WWE as well, but I grew up as a WCW fan. That's how I got, became a fan of pro wrestling. And really started watching wrestling during the WCW days and, the Attitude Era and stuff like that. But I was a big WCW guy. I was a big fan of WCW. And yes, I know that the company folded and Vince bought the company. I know all that. But watching Sting growing up, when I was a kid, Sting was a legend. Even at that time, Sting was well before his time. And if you guys know what I'm talking about, you guys seen the matches that Sting has had. I mean, whether he was teaming with Flair, whether he was going up against the Great Muta. I remember the Halloween Havoc match that he had with when he was teaming up with Flair against Muta and Terry Funk. Phenomenal match. Rest in peace as well to Terry Funk. He just had great matches, man. Great memories in WCW. And, obviously, I talked about this before. If you guys were here from the very beginning when I used to do my Monday Night Madness episodes and covering old WCW pay-per-views, I always remember that Starrcade. This was well after, when Sting was the Surfer Sting and came back as the Crow Sting. He had all those great vignettes. It was one of the greatest storylines, in my honest opinion, in all professional wrestling. I mean, Sting completely changed his character, okay, from the Surfer Sting to the Crow Sting. And this whole storyline between him and Hogan went on for a full year, where Sting didn't say a damn thing. Didn't say anything. All you saw was Sting in the rafters, or you would see Sting come down from the rafters and scare the NWO. And then when it came time for Mean Gene trying to get an interview with Sting, Sting would say nothing. He said nothing for an entire year. The only thing that was said was pretty much his presence. That you knew that he was going after the NWO and mainly Hollywood Hogan. And then we get this great storyline and this build until finally, after an entire year, we get to Starrcade. I believe it was Starrcade 96 or Starrcade 97. And then we get this final product of this storyline between Sting and Hogan that leads to Starrcade. And this was the first time us fans get to see Sting in a match as the Crow Sting. You know, you have Hogan come out, and then Sting has a great entrance, great theme song, legendary theme song, and he comes out to the ring, and the place erupts. And then we get to the match, and then it's like, all right, well, Hogan all of a sudden goes over. He beats Sting. And then you have Bret Hart come out from the ramp. He comes down. He attacks the referee. I believe it was referee Nick Patrick. He attacks the referee. Then all of a sudden, Bret Hart's the new champion, or a new referee. And then he sounds for the bell. The match continues. And then Sting gets up, applies a Scorpion Deathlock on Hogan. Hogan taps out. Bret sounds for the bell. And then we get a new World Heavyweight Champion as Sting. It was a great moment. It was a great moment. And Sting's had phenomenal moments throughout his entire career, man. It was just one of those things where, you know, seeing his final match last night and how it went. And again, you know what? Tony Khan, that's the other thing I want to talk about quickly, too. Tony Khan. A lot of people give Tony Khan a lot of flack, man. Myself included. You know, I'm not saying that, you know, when things don't go right, I don't blame Tony Khan. I have. Absolutely. But I will say this in behalf of Tony Khan. What he's done with Sting, bringing a guy in like that, a legend, where obviously we saw his run in TNA, which wasn't a bad run. And then we go from TNA to Sting's short run in WWE and how WWE just dropped the ball immensely with Sting. And then you see Tony Khan and Sting talking about this on the media scrum after Revolution, and that Tony Khan took notice of how he was getting treated in TNA in his last hurrah in TNA and then his WWE run. And Tony was like, you know what? I don't want to see Sting walk away from wrestling like that. So he brought in Sting to allow Sting to finish his story his way. And what better way to do it than what he did last night? It was a great moment. From top to bottom, man. The vignettes, everything. You know, and obviously Sting gives a lot of praise to Darby Allin. And, you know, who knows? You know, I'm not saying that Sting, we'll never see Sting again. I just don't think we're going to see Sting in a wrestling capacity. But hopefully, once in a blue moon, we maybe see Sting. You know, who knows? But it was just a great moment. And I think, like I said, Tony Khan gets a lot of flack. But you got to see what Tony Khan has done for Sting through his 3-year career in AEW. You know, he really took notice on Sting and let Sting just, you know, run roughshod and do what he wanted to do within AEW. And it really worked. You know, he was undefeated. I mean, it's just a great thing for Tony Khan. You know, and that's one thing that I will say on behalf of Mr. Tony Khan is that he did a phenomenal job with the treatment of what he did with how he treated Sting. And the way that Sting finally went out and had his retirement match. You know, and all, you know, again, golf clap to Sting, both Sting and Tony Khan. But like I said, man, Tony Khan gets a lot of flack for a lot of things. But this was one of those things where you cannot point the finger at Tony Khan and say, oh, he dropped the ball on this. No, Tony Khan did a phenomenal job on how he handled Sting through Sting's tenure in AEW and giving Sting his final last match in AEW and his final wrestling match of his career. And you know what? My hands go off to... My congrats goes off to Tony Khan. I think Tony Khan did a phenomenal job with the handlement of Sting leading up to his retirement match. But getting back to Sting really quick, man. You know, Sting, just the memories. And, you know, there's always going to be that one thing. And I know some people, you know, some of you guys who watch this podcast, which, again, I do appreciate. There's always going to be that one match that everybody's going to talk about, no matter until the end of time. The one match the fans always wanted to get but never got. And that's Sting versus Taker. You know, and yeah, you can play any video game you want and create that whole storyline and that match and everything else like that, which is awesome. But could you imagine, okay, if Sting, and I'm glad Sting didn't in a way, because I was a WCW fan growing up. But could you imagine the storyline between Sting and Taker? And then we get the final product of WrestleMania. Could you imagine how that storyline, you can do it for an entire year and build off that? Where you can even have Sting, you know, obviously they won't wrestle each other until WrestleMania, but you can see Taker have great matches, great vignettes, great promos against Sting, and then Sting having his vignettes against Taker. And being in some of those buildings, and, you know, you hear the crow and all this other stuff, and Sting cuts a great promo on Taker, or maybe we get a short little storyline between Sting and Taker and Kane, and Sting beats Kane and pisses off Taker. And then finally at WrestleMania, we would have got Sting versus Taker, the dead man versus Sting. I mean, come on, man. I mean, the storyline writes itself, and it's one of those things that it's always going to be like, damn, you know, what would have happened if we would have got Sting versus Taker back in like 95, 96, 97. Could you imagine? It'd be epic. Absolutely awesome. And even in the video package last night, I also looked at that video package and they showed the Warrior. Obviously, if you guys don't remember, I believe it was Sting's tenure during his time in Tennessee's promotion. I think it might have been Mid-South, if I'm not mistaken. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember he was teaming up for a little bit of time with the Ultimate Warrior. And I think they were known as the Blade Runners back then. And, obviously Sting went his way and Warrior went his old way. But it was just great to see, at one time you had Sting and Ultimate Warrior being tag team partners. And I think that was their time in the promotion down there in Tennessee. And again, I don't know exactly what promotion it was. It could have been Mid-South, who knows. But again, it was great to see Ultimate Warrior. You got to saw matches that Sting had with Muta. Muta's an absolute legend as well. He's had a phenomenal career, man. And it's one of those things where you got to give respect where respect's due. All right, where you see Sting, he was there from the beginning to the end with WCW. He was a part of one of the first matches and the last. I think the last match he had was, I forgot what area it was. But I remember the match. It was Sting and Flair. And I remember, Vince came on the Titantron and said that he had bought WCW. He's bought his competition. And hell, even Shane McMahon was there. So my first initial, I remember watching it. I remember, my first initial thought was, wow, Shane McMahon's on WCW. Did he buy the company? Is Shane running WCW? And then you see Vince show up on the Titantron and say, well, I bought my competition. And I'm like, this is it. It's over. And it was a sad day, man. As a fan of WCW, it was a damn sad day. And we've all been there. If you guys are wrestling fans, you always had those one moments where it's like, damn, man, I can't believe that happened. Like the passing of Eddie Guerrero. Big fan of Eddie, by the way. When he passed away, I was like, wow, that's crazy. And it kind of almost was almost surreal. Like, holy shit, how did this happen? And then we have, obviously, the story of Benoit that was so crazy. But if you were a fan of Benoit and what he did in wrestling, and then you see this story come out with Benoit and then he passed away, it's like, holy shit, man. You don't realize at the same time, but you see these guys on TV, but you have no idea what's going on in their personal lives, man. You have no idea what goes on behind that curtain. You got no idea. Nothing. And then you have other moments that have happened in pro wrestling, or the passing of Jay Briscoe, which shocked everybody, or when Brody Lee passed away, it shocked, or one of the other biggest ones, Bray, when Bray then recently passed away, and it's like, holy shit, Bray Wyatt passed away, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, and how it relates to Sting is that we all grow up watching wrestling, you get so in tune with these wrestlers, and you grow up as a fan, or it's like, wow, man, and you share these storylines, you share these moments with that wrestler. And I think a lot of people last night had that moment with Sting. Like I said, you saw that guy in the crowd last night bawling his eyes out because he was probably a lifer for Sting, man. He was probably a lifelong fan since this guy was a kid, watching Sting grow up, and that person going through the ups and downs of his personal life, and watching Sting on TV, maybe making his life a little bit better or a little bit easier, growing up as a kid or had a rough life or something like that, and seeing Sting wrestled this whole time, 30, 40 years, and then finally this is his last match. You know what I mean? And it was the same thing I was talking about with like Benoit and Guerrero. You share all these moments with these guys, and you don't think, oh, these guys they're gonna go away, or they're gonna retire, or God forbid something happens in their personal life. You don't think about it as a fan. At least I didn't at the time, because you're young and naive. You don't think about those things. But all you thought about was like, man, these guys are awesome. These guys are your heroes. These guys are like Superman. You know what I mean? Like, the stuff they do in this ring is incredible. Springboards, drop kicks, frog splashes, diving headbutts, Razor's Edge. Rest in peace to Razor Ramon, by the way, Scott Hall. It was just one of those things. And then, I look at the match last night with Sting and the culmination of a 40-year career that he's put together, and some of the phenomenal matches he's had, being a part of the Four Horsemen a short period of time, and, Ole Anderson, rest in peace to Ole, kicking him out of the Four Horsemen, you know what I mean? And teaming up with Flair, and, teaming up with Lex. Him and Lex had a great tag team career. Lex is obviously a good buddy of Sting and vice versa, and the matches they had. Sting and Lex being a part of the NWO Wolfpack when it was Kevin Nash, Sting, Lex, Conan. They were all a part of this NWO Wolfpack, and at first they were the main few guys of the NWO Wolfpack going up against NWO Black and White with Hogan. So again, it's just one of those moments. And then seeing his son last night dressed up as the NWO Wolfpack Sting, it was just awesome. It was awesome to see. And then seeing Sting's other son dressed as Sting back in the day, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Great American Bash in '91, where Sting wore the red, white, and blue face paint. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but to me, I believe it was the Great American Bash 1991. But I think it was in Baltimore, if I'm not mistaken. But again, it was just a great moment, man. And there are some people that really didn't follow WCW, didn't follow Sting's career, didn't really know anything really about Sting or watch Sting until we got in TNA or his tenure in WWE. But to me, I grew up watching Sting at a very early age, man. I was a big fan of Sting. And, seeing the highs and lows of Sting and what he's gone through. I mean, he was there for WCW, there for WWE, TNA, and now AEW. So, I mean, it was just one of those great moments, to see Sting ride out and do it the way he wanted to do it. I know some people were pissed off that Sting was like, you know what, or everybody's like, oh, Sting, I can't believe Sting picked the Bucks to be this last match. Why not Darby Allin? And myself included, I wanted it to be Sting versus Darby, and Sting kind of passing the torch to Darby Allin, if you will. But when you come to think about it, and you see the media scrum after the show, Sting says that he picked the Bucks to be his final opponents. He respects the Bucks, and it was also a sense of comfortability with the Bucks. And obviously having Darby Allin there just made it a lot better for Sting, and that's exactly what Sting wanted. So Sting wanted this matchup, and that's what Sting got what he wanted. And what better way to do it in Greensboro, North Carolina, and in front of his family, his friends, his colleagues. Some of his biggest rivals, and to be a part of this matchup with the Bucks, and it was great. I mean, my thing too, man, if the Bucks would have beat Sting and Darby Allin for those AEW Tag Team Championships, wow, the Bucks would have got booed out of the building. They would have been the biggest heels of all time, and fortunately enough, Sting and Darby, walked out as AEW Tag Team Champions. But speaking about those AEW Tag Team Championships, really quick, because Sting and Darby have won those belts, they are now vacated. And from what I understand, Tony Khan announced a tournament that will take place to crown the new AEW Tag Team Champions. Which, obviously when he said that, I was excited. Hopefully, we get back to tag team wrestling and bringing back the really good tag team division that AEW has. But it also made me think, man, what's going to happen next with Darby Allin? What is next for Darby? And then I got news later that night that Darby's next match will be at AEW's big show, Big Business, on the 13th of March at the TD Garden. It's going to be Darby Allin versus Jay White. Solid matchup. So I was a little worried at first. I was like, man, well, Sting's leaving. What's next for Darby? But then I started also thinking, too, what's next for Flair? Does Flair leave AEW? Is he done? How does Flair fit into AEW moving forward? You know what I mean? Because the whole thing was Flair being there for Sting's final ride. So now that we got that and it's done and over, what's next for Flair, and how are you really going to incorporate Flair into any kind of storyline when it pertains to AEW in the foreseeable future? So there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered that we're not getting yet. But again, this night pretty much was all about Sting, farewell matchup, and we finally got it. And it was finally something that Sting wanted to do his way and his way only, and he got an opportunity to do so. So again, I will reiterate, hats off to Tony Khan. As a fan, thank you, for Sting. Thank you for all you've done. Thank you for what you've done for the wrestling business, by the way. And as a fan growing up, man, and watching you wrestle, thank you. Obviously he probably won't hear this, but as a fan, thank you, because what you've done for me as a kid and getting invested in wrestling fan, it also went down from my entire family, man. My entire family are humongous wrestling fans. From my late great grandfather, watching Andre the Giant, Bruno Sammartino, and passing it down to me, and then, my siblings. I have a sister who's 20 years old, man, that still watches wrestling, and she's been watching wrestling since she was a little baby. You know what I mean? So it's a whole family thing for me when it pertains to wrestling. It's passed down through my entire family, my grandmas, my grandfather. My grandpa was a big influence on me growing up as a kid, and hearing the stories, that he saw Andre wrestle, seeing Coco Beware, seeing Bruno Sammartino, and seeing those guys wrestle, Stan Hansen, you know what I mean? And all the stories that my grandfather passed down to me, Bruiser Brody, Abdullah, these are all the wrestlers that he saw growing up when he was a kid. You know what I mean? The Von Erichs as well. So like, it just got passed down to me from generation to generation. And then, when I finally got into it and watched the WCW, and then I remember seeing a guy like Sting, and it was just a great moment, man. So you guys got a little history about me and what I've gone through with pro wrestling, and why I'm a big fan of wrestling, man, because it's just been passed down from me from generation to generation to, watching pro wrestling. From my grandfather, when I was a little kid, watching wrestling with him, and, my grandparents being involved in wrestling and stuff and watching it with me, and how cool they were about it, man. It was really cool. And then seeing Sting's last match last night, it was kind of like, damn, I've been watching Sting wrestle since I was a little kid, and then, here he is retiring. So it was just, I don't know, it's kind of nostalgia for me. But I will say this in closing, for Mr. Steve Borden Sting, thank you for what you've done for this business. Thank you for giving us phenomenal matches for us fans to watch and to enjoy. All the memorable moments you had in wrestling and the great matches you put together for us fans. So thank you very much for what you've done for professional wrestling. And thank you, Tony Khan, for allowing us as fans to see Sting's last match, and for Sting to finally get his final farewell that he in wrestling that he deserves. So thank you, Tony Khan, and thank you, Sting. So with that being said, this is my review of AEW's Revolution. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.